Many thanks for staying with us. We are now discussing the causes and solution to coup in Nigeria. Some school of thought have opined that perhaps the reason we are having this incessant coup is tied to the economic angle of it all. If the people are happy, if they are well fed, that perhaps they might not be turning to coup. Do you agree with that?
Well, I think yes. Yes, economic hardship is part of, because in Niger and Gabon, the coup have been applauded by people. We have seen them on the street, at the stadiums, applauding the new leaders. So, definitely. And in our country, Nigeria, we have seen at a time when we had coup, and we know that they were well received, because people think, okay, this change will give us liberation, will be a new hope, a new beginning, a new opportunity for, So, well, that's my own take on that. That, yes, people we have, after they have been in this same system for 52 years, for example, in Gabon, under the same, from the father to the son, and obviously there's poverty. Now with the new opportunity of military intervention, and they're also promising to transit to civilian administration. So people will definitely have hope that, well, maybe what is coming is better than what they have.
Okay, all right. Because if we are to look at the steps that, let's take for instance, African Union and ECOWAS concerning the one that happened in Niger, they are so quick to tell them to return to civilian rule and over the government to the ousted president. A lot of people seem to be jubilating that is no longer there. Do you feel like perhaps the African Union and ECOWAS need to listen more to what the people are saying, rather than insisting that these people should go back to democratic rule?
Yeah, we know that was even a mistake in the case of Niger, because you are giving the new military leaders 7 days to hand over. That was, putting that in front was actually not reading the situation well, and we have seen that was not to be, and they were not accepting it, because that was not. So maybe the leaders, the African leader, the ECOWAS, should do something about the state leaders that they have among themselves, okay, and see how they can engender a new leadership. Young people, like we have seen in the world, like in France, when we have a 44-year-old, in Canada, in other places where we have new energy coming into the picture. So that's what they should do, and talk about those who are sitting there, changing the constitution among them as leaders in Africa, and putting themselves and amending the constitution. Like in Uganda, the man has amended the constitution and set time limit and do the constitution again, and said at 75 you can contest for 2 times. I just won another election about 2 years ago. It has been there since 1986. So I don't know how many years is that. So what are they doing about those, like in Cameroon, when we have a 90-year-old that have been there since 1983, and they are not talking about those leaders. They are not advising them to say, look, it is time to quit the state when the election is like, so that you can plan a good succession. And so people want them to talk about all those areas, not just talk about this leadership. And we have it in Burkina Faso, we have in Ivory Coast. I mean, we have, so it's not just about Niger. So what about other countries like Mali, like Chad? So I am now focusing on Niger, as if Niger alone is the only one that have a military intervention coup. What happened when that one happened in Guinea? He didn't give them 7 days. So I think those are the things that even the diplomats are talking about. And for putting that forward is not the best card. It's not. That's not the best foot to be put forward at that time. And now we have seen that those ones they are now talking about negotiation, about time, a short time to plan, and that's all we have.
Okay, and then do you feel like perhaps, because most of the countries, like 90% of them, the one who have this coup d'etat, most of them are the ones that have been colonized by the French country. So do you feel that perhaps these two could be linked to rebellion against the colonial masters?
Yes, I think that is correct to say that, because in all the narration that we have seen, we saw that even though they have been granted independence, but they are still strongly attached to France, and they have a lot of conditions. They have to have their bank international reserve in France. They have to have, France has to have the first time of refusal of contract and all of that. So, and people are not liking it because it has not bring development to this environment, and they want, the new leaders want to be detached from that apron string of their colonial master, because what has happened is, okay, colonialism has ended, but there's now a new colonialism in those areas where those leaders that are there cannot do anything, cannot take any decision without reference to France. And I think they think it's a time for them to think independently and rule the country independently. And most of them still remain poor. Some of those countries, like Niger, for example, it's one of the poorest countries in the whole world, not just in Africa. And we know that there's so much poverty in Africa. People are suffering. And so this attachment to France or being a colonial master is not really helping them to make progress, the desired progress that people, some of those countries, want to see.
And this is sad, considering that Africa is one of the richest continents in the whole world. Yes, when it comes to resources, when it comes to minerals. And that because one of this, with the speech that was made by the Coup leaders in Gabon, they were talking about how their own children are going to school. They know nothing about mining. And in countries, in Western countries where they have nothing to mine, they have people there that are studying mining, and then they are coming to the country to come and pack their resources away. So what do you think we need to do to remedy such development? Because it seems as if we are completely tied, we are still so much tethered to the colonial masters. What are the steps do you think we need to take to start breaking out of this?
Maybe they need to borrow a leaf from other countries who have successfully, transited to true independence, not just about political independence, while economically they are still dependent on their colonial masters. So maybe those new leaders, these countries that are coming in, has to really see what can be done to gain true independence and begin to use the resources. Like you said, we know that Africa is blessed with resources, we are blessed with good weather, and what we don't have is we don't have good leadership and management. Some of those resources we can't even manage them. And people, even in Nigeria, our country, people still reference the colonial era. When we have this, we have that, and now that we are managing it by ourselves, we seem not to be able to do well. About our power, about a lot of our infrastructures, and we still need to depend on expatriates, even to be able to manage or to develop our infrastructure in Africa, even in Nigeria. So there's a lot that would need to be done in Africa, and I think the new leaders should be thinking about that.
Do you feel like in Nigeria we are 100% unfettered from the bonds with the colonial masters, or do we all suffer that same syndrome?
I think we all suffer that same syndrome. It's just that the stages that we are that is different. But in Nigeria, we still depend on our colonial, for AIDS, and when we know we have what they don't even have. What they have there is good leadership and management. What we don't have is what we do. So we still have to go to them. And when we know that we are blessed with more resources, we have oil. For example, they don't have oil. They don't have a lot of, all kinds of human materials that we have in Nigeria. We know it's not even available there. But what they have there is good leadership and management. And here we don't have that. And we are, even the one we have, we waste them. We waste them on having, for example, okay, when the new administration was coming in, we know that at the time we have how many? Maybe 10 aircraft in our presidential fleet. And when the UK, even the British monarchy, they have to fly British Airways. There's no, so you can imagine, for example, the kind of waste that we are talking about. And I remember the president then, where he was saying that he's going to auction most of those aircraft in the presidential fleet, because when you listen to the budget that they need to manage presidential fleet annually, you don't need that. But we know that the Prime Minister of UK will probably fly British Airways, even the Queen. So these are the things that we need to be discussing. That there's so much, that we are wasting trying to manage people or trying to take care of people who are supposed to be rendering service to us, who are government, who are servants of the people, and they now become our masters. And they are living in luxury, and they are not sensitive to what, and that's why, the Nigeria Labour Congress is talking about the warning strike. That they want to know that, they should know that there's hardship. People cannot eat. There's no food. People are suffering. And those are the pressure that people suffer, and so maybe they are not aware. Maybe once they get to the other side, they just suddenly forget that people are suffering, and even the way they carry this, they rub it on our faces, you know, on the roads and everything. So there's a long time our leaders begin to now understand that they are there. If they are really there to represent us, then they should not be living the kind of lifestyle they are living.
Okay, so let us also take a look at some of our neighbors, the ones that are facing worse condition, or even the condition is not even as bad as we have it here in Nigeria. Although that is debatable. Some people might say that we do not really suffer that much in Nigeria when it is compared to other African countries. But now let us take for instance that the suffering we have all accumulated is same in some part with other African nations. And these are the countries that we have coup happening because they are not satisfied with things going on there. It is not debatable that Nigerians too are not satisfied with what is going on in the country right now. So do you think that there might be chances that we might also need to fear a coup d'etat in Nigeria too?
Well, I think we have graduated from that. That's my own take. That because we have had our own time when we have this coup, you know, successful coup. We have had so many of them. Okay, Gabon this is probably first time in 56 years. But you know that we have our own. We have our own. So we have learned. And okay, this is the largest democracy. This is the biggest country, black country in the whole world, and we have a corp of light-skinned people. And we now know that even the military dictator that we have in the past did not add value to us as a country. So now we want to improve on our democracy, and we can be a model to other countries in Africa. I think that's where we are, and that's where we should look at it to be able to move forward. To know that our leaders need to now know that this democracy has to be protected, has to be guarded jealously, because the other option that we have, the other option that is waiting, is not what we desire. So, and for us not to get to that, they must offer us dividend of democracy, as they say, and offer good governance to this country, so that there's development, there's progress, and everybody can know that they are trying to do their best for the country.
Okay, and how would you rate the Nigerian president, that's Bola Tinubu, how would you rate his response to other African countries who are currently battling coup? Do you think it is necessary, or it is just interfering in something that is completely out of the jurisdiction? Okay,
you know the president is wearing two caps.
Yes.
He's the chairman of the ECOWAS, and is the president of Nigeria. So, and I'm sure most of those opinions about Niger that he expressed was not just his Nigerian opinion or his personal, it was the consensus of the ECOWAS in that meeting. And so, but now, I'm sure they also changed that now to say, okay, we're going to negotiate diplomatically with Niger and all of that. So, but the African leaders that we have, they must know that Nigeria, I mean, whatever narrative about Africa is not good. We seem to be at the back on the whole continents in the world. We seem to be the poorest, you know, the most backward, always begging for help from other countries, even those countries are not as blessed as Africa. So they must sit down and put on their thinking cap to advance the cause of progress in our continent.
Okay, and do you feel like perhaps it's time African Union started holding the government, the heads of government in each country accountable? For example, do you see it taking place that if a country, if the citizens are complaining, if things are poor, do you feel like we could have this instance when the African Union could actually recommend that a particular leader be removed because he's not doing any benefit to his own countrymen and to the continent as a whole?
Well, I don't know, to the extent that they have their non-interference chapter in their conduct, you cannot go and interfere in another jurisdiction that is not your own. But I think they should have a peer review group among themselves, you know, that should be able to come together, you know, put scholars together, you know, researchers together to be able to advise them. For example, we expect to see that they do something about those city leaders among themselves to say, okay, it's time for you to, you know, put on a transition process so that you can go and other people can come in and they can be developed. I think they should be able to look themselves in the face and tell themselves the truth, instead of just blaming the military leaders for intervening or giving orders to say, if you don't leave, we'll come and intervene. But I think they should look at the whole scenario and be able to have a total, you know, solution, not just because those military leaders are also citizens of those countries, and maybe they are also answering to those pressures that have been brought to them. You know, remember that in this saga we have in Nigeria, some people are also calling for what happened in the year should happen, or what happened. So, but we don't want to, because we know that that may not be where we would want to be, but that we should have good governance. Our leaders, political elites should come together and know that there's hardship in the land. People are complaining, and so you cannot begin to live as if it doesn't matter, you cannot hear it, or palliatives and what those palliatives that cannot, you know, sustain anyone, and that's what you are thinking about. But they must think for the greater good of the numbers of our citizens.
Okay, and some public opinion have stated that perhaps the reason the AU cannot take any decisive action when it comes to corrupt leaders of each country is because they themselves, as leaders of each country, might have a target on their back. Because it seems as if all the leaders in Africa, well, this is just generalization, I'm sure that is not what is obtainable in all African countries, seem to be corrupt. Would you also agree with that? Yeah,
there's we know that what has slowed down development in Africa, we must tell ourselves it is corruption. So some of our leaders, you know, the kind of things that they don't need is what they acquire, and they don't just acquire it and even allow it to be invested in their nation. They take it to the West, you know, to all those jurisdictions where there's development, and they see the leaders there that they don't do that. But so corruption is one big issue that we have in Africa, and that has slowed us down developmentally. So, and when we have leaders who can reason, that who can look at that, then maybe it will be time for us to make progress.
Okay, all right, now to round up completely, what advice would you give to African countries, African citizens, the leaders, and then we'll now come back here to Nigeria? What advice would you
give? Okay, I'll just say to our African leaders to know that there's suffering in Africa. And even in Nigeria, you know, a lot of very upward mobile people are escaping from our country, and they are going to the West, you know, even to every part of the world that can be, doors can be opened unto them. And you know, so it's not good, it's not good. So the leaders must do something about it. When you have your young, very mobile, middle class people, enlightened people who are running away, who are every day, you know, go to the passport offices, to the embassies, it's ridiculous. Something is wrong, and the leaders must reference that in whatever developmental policy that they bring to the table.
Okay, Laura, what about here in Africa? What advice
in Nigeria?
Yes, in Nigeria.
So yes. We can, okay, these leaders that are coming, they really have to, and I will just say that with having almost 48 ministers already thinking, oh, are we just going back? Because I remember that even when the last mention came in, try to streamline the ministries, try to bring them, you know, and now we are expanding them again, as if that is what's going to bring development. I don't think so. I think we need, our leaders in Nigeria must know that they need to cut down the cost of governance. You can't be borrowing, and look at the fuel subsidy that have been removed, look at the way people are suffering. So you can't have a bloated cabinet or administration at federal level, at even subnational levels, and you think it's going to help us to develop? No, I don't think. I think the smarter they are, the government machinery, the smarter, the more you are able to move, the lighter you are able to run. But when you burden, and like the legislature, the Speaker of the House having 33, you know, special assistants and all of that, the Senate President, all of that. So it's just like, have they learned anything? Also, that is the problem. So we must know that, look, the cost of governance must be reduced. That is the first thing. That is even to show that you even understand what the country is going through, how you can bring development, how you can have a policy that will make the youth of this country to have hope that is tomorrow, and they are not running away to anywhere.
All right, thank you very much. That was inspirational. Thank you very much for your input. It has really been lovely having you here with us. And that's Dr. Felix Olorunda. He's a security expert. Many thanks again for being with us here on Firecrackers.
Thank you.
And apologies to Professor Remi Ayede, who was supposed to join us last, but it seems there was an issue with the connection. Well, this is where we'll be drawing the curtain close on today's episode of Firecrackers. I hope you have learned as much as I have, and I sincerely hope that we would all be able to adapt this in our own lives, because we're always pointing to the leaders, but we as citizens, definitely there's much that we too could do to better the situation in Nigeria. The leaders are greedy, but what about you? Can you say you're innocent? We should really ponder on that and try to amend our ways. And it has really been a pleasure on this episode of Firecrackers. My name is Mr. Salako. Do have a wonderful week ahead. See you next week.